The signal that failed. First contact goes wrong. The galaxy had rules. Simple rules that every species learned quickly. When the Eternal Collective arrived at your world, you bowed. When they activated their compliance wave, you surrendered. When they offered their terms, you accepted. For 8,000 years, these rules had never been broken. The collective ship, called the Eternal Judgment, appeared above Earth on a Tuesday morning. It was massive, large enough to block out the sun over entire continents. Its surface was smooth and dark, covered in symbols from hundreds of conquered civilizations. Each symbol was a reminder that resistance was pointless. Ambassador Kelrith stood in the command center of the ship. She was tall and thin, with skin that shimmered like oil on water. Her 6 eyes could see in multiple dimensions at once. She had conducted first contact with 47 different species. Every single one had followed the same pattern. Open communication channel, Kelrith commanded. The view screen activated, showing a human woman in a simple blue uniform. She had dark hair pulled back from her face and calm brown eyes. Her name tag read Director Maria Santos. Greetings, humans of Earth, Kelrith began. I am Ambassador Kelrith of the Eternal Collective. We have come to bring you into our civilization. You will share your technology, your resources, and your loyalty. This is not a negotiation. This is how things are done. Director Santos listened carefully. Then she smiled. It was not a happy smile. Thank you for introducing yourself, Ambassador, Santos said. However, Earth and humanity are independent. We're happy to talk about trade or cultural exchange. But we will not surrender our freedom to anyone. Kelrith's eyes narrowed. This was the expected first response. They always refused at first. That's why the collective had the compliance wave. You do not understand, Kelrith said coldly. We have conquered 8,000 worlds. We have absorbed 300 species. You cannot refuse us. You will see. She turned to her technician. Activate the compliance wave. Minimum intensity. The weapon that should have worked. The compliance wave was the collective's greatest weapon. It didn't destroy ships or kill people. It did something much more effective, it made beings want to surrender. The wave traveled through space faster than light. It passed through shields and walls like they weren't there. When it touched a mind, it created an overwhelming feeling of hopelessness. Victims suddenly knew with absolute certainty that fighting was useless. That their civilization was weak. That surrender was the only logical choice. No species had ever resisted it. Most lasted less than 30 seconds before their leaders were begging to submit. Kelrith watched Director Santos carefully, waiting for the usual signs. The fear in the eyes. The trembling hands. The broken voice pleading for mercy. Instead, Santos closed her eyes for a moment. Her jaw tightened. Her hands gripped the edges of her podium. When she opened her eyes again, they were wet with tears, but also filled with something Kelrith had never seen before. Determination. That's quite unpleasant, Santos said, her voice shaking slightly. It feels like everything is hopeless. Like nothing matters. Then you understand, Kelrith said. Submit now, and the feeling will stop. No, Santos said firmly. Because I've felt hopelessness before. We all have. Kelrith felt a cold sensation in her core. Something was wrong. Increase the wave, she ordered. Maximum intensity. Her technician hesitated. Ambassador, that level has caused permanent psychological damage to some species. Do it. The wave intensified. On the view screen, Santos gasped. Sweat appeared on her forehead. Her entire body went rigid. But she did not fall. She did not beg. She stayed standing. You should be unconscious, Kelrith whispered. How are you still functioning? Humanity's secret weapon. Santos took a deep, shaking breath. Because, she said slowly, humans have been afraid before. We felt hopeless before. And we learned something important. Behind Santos, other humans appeared on the screen. Military officers. Scientists. Even children. All of them looked stressed, frightened. But none of them were surrendering. Humanity has faced extinction dozens of times, Santos continued. Plagues that killed millions. Wars that destroyed entire cities. Climate disasters. Asteroid impacts. Nuclear weapons pointed at our own homes. She wiped her eyes, but kept talking. We've been so afraid that we couldn't sleep. So hopeless that we wanted to give up. But we learned that feelings are just feelings. They don't control us unless we let them. Impossible, Kelrith said. But her voice was uncertain now. My great-grandmother lived through a war that killed 60 million people, Santos said. She was terrified every single day. But she still got up. Still helped her neighbors. Still raised children. Still planted gardens. She taught me that courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is doing what's right even when you're terrified. A young man stepped forward on the screen. My name is James Chen. I'm a soldier. I've been in combat. I've been so scared I couldn't stop shaking. But my training taught me that fear is just information. It tells you to be careful, not to quit. An elderly woman spoke next. I'm Dr. Elizabeth Okoye. I've treated patients during 3 different pandemics. The fear of catching a deadly disease never goes away. But you wash your hands, wear your protection, and do your job. Because people need you. More humans spoke, one after another. A firefighter who ran into burning buildings. A mother who raised children alone after losing her partner. A teacher who worked in dangerous neighborhoods. A rescue worker who pulled people from collapsed buildings. Every single one of them had been afraid. Every single one had kept going anyway. Everything changes. Kelrith stared at the humans in growing horror. This is not how species behave. The compliance wave creates certainty of defeat. You should not be able to think clearly, let alone resist. We are thinking clearly, Santos said. That's the problem with your weapon, Ambassador. It makes us feel hopeless and afraid. But humans live with those feelings all the time. We've built our entire civilization while carrying fear and doubt. Your weapon just reminded us of feelings we already know how to handle. For 8,000 years, the Eternal Collective had never failed to bring a species into submission. For 8,000 years, the compliance wave had been perfect. Until now. Deactivate the wave, Kelrith said quietly. When the weapon powered down, Santos sagged against her podium, clearly exhausted. But she was smiling, a real smile this time. Now then, Ambassador, Santos said. Shall we start over? We're willing to talk as equals. We're willing to be friends. But we will never be your subjects. Kelrith looked at her crew. They were all staring at the view screen with expressions she had never seen before. Confusion. Uncertainty. And something else, something that worried her deeply. Respect. I need to consult with my superiors, Kelrith said finally. Take your time, Santos replied. We'll be here. We're not going anywhere. As the communication ended, Kelrith realized something terrifying. For 8,000 years, the Eternal Collective had ruled through fear. They had convinced themselves and everyone else that their power was absolute. But what happened when you met someone who refused to be afraid? Or rather, someone who was afraid but didn't care? The answer, Kelrith suspected, was about to change the galaxy forever. The galaxy learns a new truth. The Council's decision. The Grand Council of the Eternal Collective met in their ancient chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime. 12 beings sat in a circle, the oldest and most powerful members of the collective. They represented species from across the galaxy, united by their shared belief in the collective's absolute authority. Ambassador Kelrith stood in the center, making her report. Above her, a holographic display showed the encounter with Earth. The council watched in complete silence as Director Santos and her people withstood the compliance wave. When the recording ended, the silence continued for a long moment. "Explain," said Elder Vorn, a being made entirely of crystallized thought. "Explain how primitives with barely functional space travel resisted our most powerful weapon." Kelrith had spent 3 days analyzing the data. She had reviewed medical scans, psychological profiles, and historical records of humanity. Her conclusion was disturbing. The humans have experienced widespread trauma repeatedly throughout their history, Kelrith explained. Wars, diseases, natural disasters. Their civilization has been on the edge of extinction multiple times. As a result, they've developed cultural and psychological frameworks for functioning despite fear and despair. "Every species has experienced hardship," said Elder Thren, whose body was a swarm of insects that moved as one. "That does not explain this. With respect, Elder, most species experience 1 or 2 near-extinction events over thousands of years. Humans have faced dozens in just the last few centuries. They've normalized fear as part of existence. They teach their children how to be brave. They tell stories about heroes who were terrified but acted anyway. They've turned fear management into a survival skill." Another elder spoke, Matriarch Xylith, ancient and wise. "And our compliance wave simply triggers a feeling they've already learned to work through." "Precisely," Kelrith confirmed. The council members looked at each other with expressions of deep concern. "This is unacceptable," Elder Vorn declared. "If other species learn that the compliance wave can be resisted, our entire authority structure will collapse. We must eliminate the humans before they spread this knowledge." "We could try," Kelrith said carefully. "But I must warn the council, if a species can function under maximum compliance wave, they may be more dangerous than we assume. Attacking them could be unwise." "You fear them," Thren accused. "I respect them," Kelrith corrected. "There's a difference. The human problem." While the council debated, humanity was already changing the political landscape of the galaxy. Director Santos had transmitted a message to every known inhabited star system: "This is Earth. We have made contact with the Eternal Collective. They used a psychological weapon against us. We resisted. If you've experienced this weapon and believed you had no choice but to surrender, know this: there is always a choice. Fear does not have to control you." The message spread like wildfire through the collective's territory. For the first time in 8,000 years, conquered species were questioning their submission. On the mining world of Krell 7, workers stopped their labor. A young Krellian named Vosh stood on a transport platform and spoke to thousands of his people. "I was 3 years old when the collective came," Vosh said. "I remember the compliance wave. I remember the feeling of absolute hopelessness. My parents surrendered immediately. Everyone did. We've served the collective for 50 years because we thought we had no choice." He held up a data pad showing Santos's message. "But these humans, these newcomers who just discovered space travel, they felt the same weapon. And they said no. If they can resist, maybe we could have too. Maybe we still can." The crowd murmured. The feeling that swept through them was dangerous, not rebellion exactly, but something worse. Doubt. Similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. The collective's governors sent urgent messages back to Nexus Prime. The conquered species weren't rising up in open revolt. They were just questioning. Working slower. Asking why. Demanding to see the terms of their service agreements. It was the beginning of something the collective had never faced before: peaceful resistance. The first contact. 3 weeks after the initial encounter, a small human ship arrived at Telos Station, a major trading hub in neutral space between collective and independent territories. The ship was called the Friendship, and it carried just 5 humans. Captain James Rodriguez led the delegation. He was young, confident, and carried himself like someone who had nothing to prove. His team included a scientist, a linguist, a cultural expert, and a security officer. They had come to talk with representatives of the Free Worlds Alliance, A coalition of species that had successfully resisted joining the collective through military strength or distance. Ambassador Tkresh of the Valorian Empire met them in the station's central plaza. Tkresh was a massive being, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in armored plates. His species had fought 3 separate wars to remain independent. So, Tkresh rumbled, "You are the humans who defied the compliance wave. I had to see this for myself." Rodriguez smiled and extended his hand. Tkresh looked at the offered hand with confusion until the human linguist explained it was a gesture of peace. The massive alien carefully shook Rodriguez's hand. "We didn't come to brag," Rodriguez said. "We came to learn. We're new to the galaxy. We need allies, friends, teachers. We heard the Free Worlds Alliance has successfully maintained independence. We'd like to know how." Tkresh laughed, a sound like rocks grinding together. "Through strength. We built weapons and shields. We made ourselves too expensive to conquer. But you just told the collective no and walked away. How did you know they wouldn't simply destroy Earth?" "We didn't," Rodriguez admitted. "That's why we're here. We need to learn fast. We need to know who our friends might be and what threats we face. Courage is important, but so is intelligence." Over the next hours, Rodriguez and his team met with representatives from 6 different independent civilizations. They asked questions, shared information about Earth, and proposed mutual defense agreements. But more importantly, they told their story. They explained how humanity had survived so many near extinctions. They talked about their philosophies, their history, their approach to fear. And everywhere they went, people listened. The choice. Back on Nexus Prime, the Grand Council reached their decision. "We will not attack Earth," Matriarch Xylith announced. "An attack would only prove the humans right, that submission to the collective is based on fear rather than mutual benefit." "Then what do we do?" Elder Vorn demanded. "Allow them to inspire rebellion across our territory?" "We adapt," Xylith said firmly. "For 8,000 years, we have ruled through the compliance wave. We told ourselves this was necessary for galactic unity. But perhaps we were wrong. Perhaps true unity cannot be built on forced submission." The council chamber erupted in argument. Half the elders wanted war. The other half wanted negotiation. The collective, for the first time in millennia, was divided. Meanwhile, Ambassador Kelrith received a private message. It was from Director Santos. "Ambassador Kelrith, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to reach out personally because I believe we started our relationship badly. Earth would like to propose a different kind of first contact. No threats. No weapons. Just conversation. We have much to learn from your civilization's long history. And perhaps, we might have something to teach as well. Would you be willing to meet? Just you and me, on neutral ground? Let's see if we can be friends instead of enemies." Kelrith read the message 3 times. Then she drafted a response. "Director Santos, I accept your invitation. Let us talk. A new beginning." 3 months later, humanity opened its first embassy on Telos Station. It was a simple building, designed to be welcoming rather than impressive. Above the door, a sign read, "Embassy of Earth, all species welcome." Inside, humans worked alongside Krellians, Valorians, and members of a dozen other species. They shared technology, culture, and most importantly, ideas. Director Santos stood in the embassy's main hall, greeting visitors. Ambassador Kelrith was there too, now serving as the collective's official liaison to humanity. Their relationship had evolved from hostile to curious to something approaching friendship. "You've changed the galaxy," Kelrith said quietly. "Species that submitted generations ago are now demanding renegotiation of their terms. The collective is having to actually negotiate instead of simply demanding." "Is that such a bad thing?" Santos asked. "For the collective's power structure?" "Yes." "For the galaxy as a whole?" Kelrith's shimmer rippled in a way that indicated thoughtfulness. "Perhaps not. Perhaps we needed someone to remind us that civilization should be built on cooperation, not coercion. A young Krellian approached them nervously. It was Bosch, the miner from Krell 7 who had spoken to his people about resistance. Director Santos? I wanted to thank you. Because of your message, my people demanded better working conditions. The collective, they listened. They're changing our contract. We'll have better pay, shorter hours, safety protections. It's not independence, but it's better than we had. Santos smiled warmly. That's wonderful, Bosch. And you did this yourselves. You found your courage. We just reminded you it was there. As Bosch walked away, looking proud, Kelrith spoke again. There will be consequences, you know. Not all members of the collective support these changes. Some want war with Earth. Some want to destroy the Free Worlds Alliance. Some want to bring back the old ways. Let them try, Santos said calmly. Humanity has faced worse. We're afraid of what might happen, we'd be fools not to be. But fear is just fear. It doesn't control our choices. She looked out at the diverse crowd in the embassy, beings from across the galaxy, talking, laughing, learning from each other. Besides, Santos continued, we're not alone anymore. We have friends now. Species that remember their own courage. Species that are tired of being afraid. Together, we're stronger than any weapon. Kelrith followed her gaze. In just 3 months, humanity had built something the Eternal Collective had never managed in 8,000 years, genuine friendship between species, based on mutual respect rather than fear. Your species is dangerous, Kelrith observed. Not because you're powerful or aggressive. Because you're contagious. You remind others of what they could be. Santos laughed. Is that really so terrible? For the old galaxy? Yes. For the new one we're building? Kelrith's shimmer brightened. Perhaps it's exactly what we needed. Outside the embassy, ships from a dozen worlds came and went. Trade flourished. Cultural exchanges multiplied. And slowly, carefully, the galaxy began to change. The Eternal Collective still existed, still held power. But it was no longer absolute. It was now just one voice among many. And it had all started because one species heard the worst weapon in the galaxy and responded not with submission but with a simple, defiant truth. We've been afraid before. Fear doesn't have to stop us. In the vastness of space, humanity continued to spread outward, carrying that message to every world they visited. Not as conquerors or crusaders, but as friends who understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the decision to act despite it. The galaxy would never be the same. And for the first time in 8,000 years, that was a good thing.